Yalimadad and Salgirah Mubarak. My name is Ruhee and welcome to my kitchen. In just a few short weeks, we'll be celebrating Maulana Hazur Imam's 84th birthday, but things are going to look a little different. But we've come up with some creative ways to continue the celebration, and that's why I'm here today, to help prepare you for the Salgirah Cake Showcase. We're inviting the entire USA Jamaat to put on your aprons and join your families in your kitchens to bake a special cake for Maulana Hazur Imam. All you have to do is take some photos and videos while you're doing it and submit them to potentially be featured during our virtual Salgirah celebrations. Head to the Smiley USA social media channels for more details on how you can submit your photos and videos. Until then, I'll be showing you some of my favorite decorating styles, tips, and tricks to help prepare you in the kitchen. Cake decorating can seem like a challenge for some people. Some people think you need special tools. Some people think you might need some formal training, but you don't. Trust me, I speak from experience. I started baking as a hobby just a few years ago, and I started experimenting with cakes, cookies, cupcakes, whatever you may call it, and it was just a stress reliever for me. But fast forward, and it's become one of my favorite hobbies and a creative outlet. So today, I'll be showing you some household tools that you can use to create a masterpiece without having to leave the safety of your home. Typically, what you see in a kitchen, in a baker's kitchen, are some fancy tools that sometimes cost a lot of money or sometimes you have no other use for, so there's no point of having them. Let's walk through some of them. So, probably the most popular, the most famous one is this piping tool. You've got piping tips like this. This is a star piping tip. And this is just your normal round tip. And these help you create some fancy piped frosting on top of your cake. So really cool tool, but not necessary. To go along with that, you have your plastic piping bag. Again, really not that fancy, but you usually won't have a use for it unless you're baking. A few other tools are, this is a cake scraper or alternatively a bench scraper. You'll see a lot of people using this when you're creating dough for pie crusts or biscuits, or the most popular use for a cake is to actually run it along your cake after it's frosted or while you're frosting it to get a very nice smooth edge. So that's that. Another tool like that is your straight metal spatula. This is one of my favorite tools. I think it's very versatile. You can plop on icing onto your cake layers. You can scrape it smooth on the side, apply it directly from your bowl. So definitely a useful tool, but again, not necessary. Another very popular and useful tool, and I think actually this might be my favorite, this is your silicone spatula. These are just three of many I have. You can use these in baking, you can use these in just regular cooking, but they're super, super useful. They clean up the bottom of your bowls and pans really, really well, especially with frosting. It typically tends to stick to your bowls or the bottom of containers. So when you have different sizes and different corners, like this one's my little mini one, it really can get to the bottom of the bowl and clean everything out and get you all the frosting that you have. So highly recommend getting one of these if you don't have one of them. And then aside from that, I have this right here. This is my cake table, my cake turning table. Not a necessary tool unless you're baking on the regular. I like it personally because when I'm creating decorations or frosting my cakes, instead of my arm going in weird directions, all I have to do is just turn my table, and it helps me get nice smooth edges, as well as it's easier to pipe decorations or add decorations while I'm going along. And then another thing is, of course, your cake board. So you can totally decorate your cake on a plate or a tray or whatever you might have. It could just be something flat. This I personally like, especially if you're taking a cake somewhere, or if you just need something, disposable to throw away after you're done with your cakes. This is a great item, but again, you don't need it. Something I've done previously when I haven't had these on hand is actually taken a cardboard box and just covered in foil or some clean wrapping paper and just created my own cake board. And they still look really nice and they do the job. So you really don't need it. If you have it, great. If you don't, make your own. And then, of course, last but not least, you have your cake layers. And we'll get to this later. Now, I told you I'll tell you some household tools that you can use as an alternative to all of these fancy things. First up is your handy dandy butter knife. This does more than spread butter and jelly on your toast. You can use this very much like this scraper as well as this scraper. Just remember, if your butter knife has a sharp ridge right here with little grooves, you can use it if you're trying to go for a design, but I would recommend just going with the smooth edge right here, and you'll get a nice clean touch on your cake, on the sides of your cake, on the tops of your cake, but it serves a very similar purpose, just like your metal spatula. So handy tool number one. Number two is your handy dandy spoon. This is great because you can just scoop your frosting out of your bowl and plop it onto your cake. What I like about the back of this spoon is that it helps you create this really cool like dollop or like swoop look. So basically what you do is just put a bunch of frosting on the top and the sides of your cake and just swivel it around. And I'll show you how to do this when we actually get to the actual cake decorating part, but you just kind of swoop it around and it gives you this very rustic look without having the need for perfection. And that's why I like this spoon a lot. And of course, you can use a fork as well. Forks kind of help you get these ridges. If you've seen some of those cakes that have stripes, you can do the same thing with the fork. You can even dip the fork in some food coloring if you want for a colored look, and just smooth it around your cake and you'll get this colored look. So great tool to have. Now for the piping bag, all you need is a handy dandy zippy bag. Just fill it up with your frosting, push it down to a corner and just snip the corner, and it serves a very similar purpose as your fancy piping bag. You probably can't do a lot of this kind of stuff, get stars and stuff, but you can do like round dollops, create edges if you need, which I'll show you how we do that. But yeah, super easy, and usually you can find this in your pantry. So I think that's really it. The next few items I'll show you some pantry essentials. We'll go through them as we're making the cakes, but it's everything from candy, cookies, cereal, fruit, even flowers. They'll be a part of our decor, so stay tuned. All right, so we're gonna get started with decorating our cake. So the most essential part of your cake is your cake layers. So you can either use a box mix, you can find your favorite recipe online and create your own cake layers. You can have them be round, you can have them be square, 6-inch, 8-inch, 9-inch, whatever you want. Just create your cake layers, make your cake layers. And what I like to do is, if I'm going to be stacking and decorating a cake, I like to do this a few hours earlier than when I'm going to decorate, or if you can, the night before. Why? You want your cake layers to be very solid and very firm when you start decorating. If they're super, super soft, they might start toppling over, or if they're really warm, your frosting is gonna start melting, and it's just going to become a very big mess on your workstation. So if you can, bake early, use a box mix, make your own cake, whatever it is, make it early, put it in the fridge. What I like to do is saran wrap them after they've cooled a little bit right from the oven, and then just stick them in the fridge overnight. So that's what I did last night. So I have my cake layers here. I have them on my cake board. The first thing we're gonna do is take our cake layers, and for a stable cake, you want very flat cake layers. So sometimes your cake layers won't bake quite flatly, and like you can see, my cake is a little bit round, right? It's not completely flat. And while you can stack it as is, but what I've noticed is that if it is a little round, when you start stacking, things start toppling over a little bit. So I'm gonna show you a very easy way to level them out. Again, you don't need a fancy tool for it. All you need is a knife. So, all right, so to get the nice edge on your cake to make it flat, I like to use what we call a serrated knife, or a serrated bread knife, or just simply a bread knife. The difference between this knife and your regular knives that you use in the kitchen is that it's got these ridges right here. And instead of smushing your cake all together, or even just your bread all together, what it does is it nicely cuts through it, and it gives you clean cuts. So this is what we're going to be using. And all you have to do is gently pick up your cake layer, and notice I'm not putting it directly onto my cake board just yet because I'm going to be doing some slicing. I put it on the saran wrap it was in. So you can hold your cake from the top like this, and then simply put your knife at an edge where you know you want to start cutting. So you can see my flat edge right here, and you can see where the round starts. So I know I want to cut off all this round part, so I'm just going to put my knife in a little bit, and I'm going to start spinning. And as I spin, the top is slowly being cut off, and I'm not actually moving my knife too much. So I know I'll get a relatively even flat cake top after I cut this off. And as I keep going, I just push my knife in just a tad bit, and bam, your top is off. And I can show you the flat cake you're getting right here. Very much flat, your round top is gone. Now you'll have a much more even and stable cake. So let's just do that with all 3 layers now. And I'm gonna gently move this down. It's nice to have everything individually wrapped. That way you can just use that saran wrap over and over again versus having to pull new sheets apart. So let's do it once more. This, by the way, is a carrot cake. Carrot cake does not, at least this recipe, does not have butter in it. So it's a truly oil-based cake. And what I've noticed with oil-based cakes are that they're much more softer and much more, I guess you can call them flexible. So you have to make sure that you cool these. Chocolate cake is kind of like this too. So very important to have a very strong and sturdy cake, especially if you're trying to stack and layer. Now, if you're only using just 1 layer and you're just, you just want 1, layer of cake versus 2 or 3 stacked on top of each other, then you don't need to do this step. But if you're going to add some decoration on top, then it might be helpful because then you'll get a nice smooth surface to add your frosting, and then all your decoration on top will be in 1 even layer versus like going over a hill kind of thing. So on our last layer now, same thing. Sometimes you see people using like dental floss. Sometimes you see people like jabbing Q-tips on, or not Q-tips, toothpicks onto the side, sorry. I've never tried those, but I'm sure they work just fine. But personally, I found this very easy. I don't have to pull out another tool, just a knife that's in my drawer, and it gets the job done pretty quickly. And there we go. And don't throw away your cake tops. They make for a great piece of decor or a great breakfast. So don't throw them away. All right, now we have our cake layers leveled. We're ready to move on to the actual stacking part. So the first thing I want to do is actually fill my zippy bag, or piping bag in this case, with some frosting, because we'll be using this to actually create a little bit of like a frosting dam between our layers to help stack them evenly. And I'll show you why, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So let's go ahead and take our frosting. Something about frosting is that while I make my own, you can totally use store-bought frosting. Nothing wrong with that. What I like about store-bought frosting actually is that you can elevate it a little bit by adding your own flavors or adding your own colors. So if you're pinched for time or just don't really care to make your own frosting, definitely a good way to go. So I'm going to just put some frosting in there. Make sure I get enough for both layers. I'll probably just end up using most of it. Better to have more than to have to fill it up again. I think that's such a hassle, but all right, so just zip it up nice and tight, get some air out. And so you basically want to get like a nice grip on it. You probably see a little bit better, but you see how the tip right here is starting to form the same tip as a piping bag? That's basically what you want to do. So got it, got my grip. This is closed for the most part. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now, I'm not going to snip the edge just yet. I'm actually going to hold on and get my first layer ready. So what I'm going to do is actually pick up my butter knife. And if you have a little bit of frosting in your bowl, you want to take a little bit and actually put it on the base of your plate, your cake board, or whatever it may be, because this is going to serve as glue for your bottom layer. When you're decorating, when you're kind of pushing your cakes around, or even like after it's stacked, you want to make sure it doesn't slide off or move around too much. So I've added some glue frosting to the bottom of my cake board. And now I'm just going to gently place my bottom layer on. I'm as much as a perfectionist I am, I'm not going to be too worried about centering it. I think I did a decent job. But if you really truly care, you can pull out a ruler or figure all that math out, but I'm not going to do that today. We're just going to leave it like this. I think it looks fine. So I've got my first layer on, and I'm just going to snip about like this much. You just want like thick enough, not something super small. You're not piping like letters or anything, but maybe like an inch and a half off the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is actually go around the edge of my cake layer and pipe just a line of frosting. So might make a little more sense if I go around. So I'm going around, and you see how I'm making this nice little edge. That's what I want. And I like doing this because it helps, like I said, it helps create like this wall of stability and almost like a pillar for the top layers. And it's also great for when you're trying to fill your cake with like some sort of different flavor, like a jelly or a jam or a different frosting. This will help kind of give you a place to work in, and then it'll also help prevent all those fillings from seeping out. So this is a great technique I've found very, very useful. So we're gonna do this, and then I used a normal buttercream on the outside of this carrot cake, but I'm gonna fill it with cream cheese frosting. So I've got my cream cheese frosting right here. Depending on your cake, you can go as heavy or light on your frosting. What this dam also does is actually helps me determine how much frosting I need. I don't want to overdo it to where it's like seeping out. So I'm gonna make sure whatever frosting I put in here is actually in level with my little border outside. So I think I picked up enough. We can always add more on top. What I'm gonna do is take my butter knife and actually just start smoothing my frosting in between. And this is just gentle, like movement of your wrist, nothing fancy. You don't need a lot of pressure, just a little bit of light flicks of your wrist, and you'll get a nice even layer. And again, try to get as even as possible, because remember, when you stack the next layer on top, it's going to sit on this, and if one side is higher, then your cake will start becoming imbalanced. So try to get as smooth as you can. And I think I've generally got as much frosting as my border allows for, so I'm just gonna call it quits here. There we go. So I'm gonna leave it like that. At this point, you can just keep stacking. Because this is carrot cake, one of my favorite things to do with carrot cake is actually add some nuts. Sometimes I put it in the layers, sometimes I just put it on top of the frosting. So I'm gonna do that right now. I'm just gonna grab some walnuts. Not necessary, maybe you can see better here, but not necessary. You can see how I just kind of broken them up. You can put them in a chopper or something and get them more fine, but I'm just gonna take a few pieces and just sprinkle them on my cake right here. I like a little bit of crunch in my carrot cake. So, just a few walnuts. What you can also do is actually roast your walnuts in the oven for a few minutes. So if you turn your oven up to about 400 degrees and lay out your chopped walnuts or even whole walnuts or any nut that you want to use, and put it in the oven for about 7 to 8 minutes, you'll get a nice toasty flavor from the nuts, and I feel like they hold their crunch a little bit better when they're in the frosting. So that's an option. I didn't do that today, but if you have the opportunity, highly recommend it. All right, so we got our first layer done. We're gonna repeat the same thing with our second layer. Now, I'm just gonna put it down right there on top. This is really important that you get even. You want to make sure that it's in line with the bottom one, and it's also as flat as you can get it so that it's not tilting over one side and you don't have like a little bit of a little hump right here. So I think I did a decent job. I just nicely laid it on. So that's that. Let's repeat that process again with our frosting border. And this particular frosting right now is a little soft. It's been sitting out on my counter, but if that starts to happen to you, sometimes it's important to make sure your frosting is in a more solid state so that it doesn't start to seep everywhere. This is still workable, but I can see that if it sits out any longer, it'll start to melt. But all you have to do is just pop it into the fridge, not the freezer, just the fridge for a few minutes, and it'll be okay. So, it's gonna go a little more quickly here. So we have a few other things to do today. All right, so same thing, just smoothing out my frosting here. And like I said, you don't need this turntable, but you can see how easy it is for me to not move my hand as much, where I can just move the bottom of this thing. So, got a little too much here. I'm just gonna scrape it off and just put it back in my bowl. That's totally okay. There you go. And same thing, add a few more walnuts to this for the crunch. And that should be good. And I like to center the walnuts in the middle portion because if you put something on your border, it'll probably start to leak out. So just try to keep it into the middle one. All right, so for my final layer, because I'm doing a 3-layer cake, I want to flip it over. So if you can see here, this is the bottom of my cake. Reason being, when I stack it now, I'm gonna get this nice edge versus something I cut that may not be even. So if I flip it over, I'm guaranteeing myself a nice edge on top that I can use to get a smooth surface when I frost the end. So this is what it looks like. Voila. And like you can see, when I started stacking, this started spilling out, but it's okay because it's the border, the inside is not coming out. So totally okay. Now at this point, what I wanna do is take some frosting, light layers of frosting. So I'm gonna use my buttercream and just go around the edge and take any of this like frosting that's leaking out and just spread it across your cake layers. This doesn't have to be a thick thing, but what we're doing is crumb coating it. So crumb coating is basically applying a thin layer of frosting around your cake so that it traps in any of the crumbs that are coming off of the cake. So like you can see some of these crumbs leaking out, and I don't want that, especially if I'm going for a very smooth, clean cake. I don't want those crumbs to show. So I'm gonna do a light one just to show you here, but typically what you do after you're done crumb coating it is stick it in the fridge for about 20 minutes, and then you add your final layer of frosting. We're not gonna do that with this one because I want to show you a different technique on this, but I'm just gonna do a light layer. You can see how it just kind of acts like glue to everything on the cake. So just gently keep going around. And again, I'm using my butter knife, nothing else. Just using my butter knife, going around, taking more frosting as I need it, but sometimes you just can repurpose it from a different side of the cake if you've gotten too much frosting on one side, or you've got some spots where it's seeping out from the middle. Just keep going until you're satisfied. And you've covered all the edges everywhere. You might have to turn your butter knife horizontally to get the bottom layer, but generally this happens pretty quickly. And you can see I've got some extra frosting here. I'm just going to take it, wipe my butter knife off onto my pan, onto my bowl, and that's really a crumb coat. So usually at this stage, I'll stick it in the fridge and let it cool for a few minutes, but I want to show you a different technique that doesn't require me to do it. So I'm going to take my spoon, and remember how I told you about creating these like swoops on your cake? That's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm just gonna go back into my cream cheese frosting because I have more of that. And again, I'm just gonna put some on just in random ways. I might actually use my spatula to do this. Grab a little bit of frosting, put some there, a little more. And I can always just scoot it down to the edge if I need to, but just do this. And you can see, I'm just gonna create a layer first. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just create a layer and then start swooping your spoon. And you're getting these nice, beautiful like grooves in your cake that actually look very elegant. And sometimes you even see cakes like in bakeries that have this sort of design on it, and I think it looks beautiful. It just kind of shows you how like creamy and nice the frosting is. So personally love, love, love this style. And I think it's not done as much as it should be done. So just do that all around your cake. Some people call this messy. I don't think it's messy. I think it's this rustic look to your cake. So just go around, keep going. Does not need to be perfect. Trust me. This is also great when you're in like a hurry or you don't have as much time, to spend on your cake. This is a great way to make it seem like you've done a lot of work without actually having done the work. I'm gonna kind of cover that edge over there. Up, okay. Keep going. I'm gonna make sure I don't miss any spots. You can come back and do them as you need, but I'm trying to go as evenly as possible. I think this is working particularly well with cream cheese frosting. Cream cheese frosting tends to be more creamy and silky. It doesn't solidify as much as buttercream frosting because that's made purely of butter and sugar. So if you're looking for that swoopy effect, I think cream cheese frosting does a great job of it. Only problem with cream cheese frosting is that if you leave it out for too long, or if you're, taking a cake to a birthday party or something like that, or leaving it out on a counter, it'll start to melt and it'll start to get all too soft on you. So tastes delicious, but does have a few things to be mindful of while you're doing. So I think I'm almost done. Let's keep going. Yep. Just got a little bit more on this side, and then we're just going to top it with a few fresh ingredients to give it the final touches. All right, so I think I've missed a spot there, right here. Okay. Yeah, so now I'm starting to kind of go up and down to get all of the edges on top and bottom. And I'm now getting this nice like swoop. And so I've done that, and now I'm just gonna kind of go around and just do a few more swoops because I think it needs a few more rounds. I like the circular motion on this a little bit better than just the straight. Yeah, I like that on the edge a little bit better than something else. Yep, just cover that up. Like I said, you can't really make a mistake with this one. The point of this is to be a little freeform, but it still ends up looking very nice. And then some people are a little concerned about having like, rough edges, and I'll show you what you can do to kind of cover those up. Cool, so I think I like how the sides of my cake are looking. I want to do something a little bit different on top. So I'm gonna pick my butter knife up again, and I'm actually going to smooth it out. Just another technique I wanted to show you. Smooth it out a little bit. Just try to get an even layer, because the next design style kind of requires that. So just try to get a decent even layer. And then take your butter knife and start from the outer edge and start turning either your hand, or if you're using a turntable, just start spinning it. And as you can see, it's creating this nice little spiral look inside my cake. And you end up with this nice little design on top. So it kind of looks like a log. If it were brown, it'd look like a tree log, but this is the final kind of look I'm going for. It's a very rustic look, and we're just gonna add some finishing touches to it. So, like I said, we're gonna add a fresh element. So what I'm gonna do is, when I baked this cake yesterday, I actually used fresh carrots. So for a little pop of color, I'm just gonna take some of those existing shredded carrots and just kind of sprinkle them on the side. Just make sure you wash your carrots before you use them. But otherwise, I think this just looks absolutely beautiful. The nice little pop of color you need against the white frosting. You can just pick them up as they fall. Just around the edges. I think that looks very nice. And then, do you remember some of the cake layers we had left? Well, this is a great opportunity to use some of them, the cake tops. I just like to kind of sprinkle some on top as well to kind of show that this is what the inside looks like. So, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's whatever you want this to be, but I think this adds a nice little touch and a good way to use your cake toppings. A cake I like to really do this with is the red velvet, because the red velvet outside is just plain white, but when you add these cake scraps to the top, really adds a nice pop of color. Yep. There you go. You could even do this on the bottom edge if you want, either with the carrots. And then I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of nuts inside, just in the center, to give it that final look. And voila, that is our first cake. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have smooth edges. This is one of many, many ways you can decorate a cake. What I would recommend, which I'm not going to do right now, but maybe just cleaning up your edge with a napkin, so you get a nice clean board or a plate or whatever you're working on. But this is it. This is our first cake. Just give it a nice little touch here. You can see the detail on the edge like that. Great. We can move on to the next cake now. All right, now that we finished our first cake, the carrot cake, we learned how to stack it, fill it, and do a very easy decoration with your butter knife and your spoon. So the next cake I'm going to teach you is something a little more simple as well, something that's very popular these days, and it's the naked cake. So I've already got it started a little bit to help speed things up today. So I'm gonna clean up my workstation a little bit and bring out some new ingredients that we're gonna be using to help top our cake. Now this cake is a lemon cake. I personally love lemon cake, especially in the summer, but I just think it's such a fresh cake, and you can pair it with buttercream, vanilla buttercream, or you can pair it with cream cheese frosting, which is what I'm going to be using today. So I've got our cake here. I've got 2 layers already done, and what I've done is between each layer I've created our frosting border, or a little frosting dam. And in this cake, I've done it for 2 reasons. 1, because I'm filling it with cream cheese frosting. And 2, I actually wanted to change this up a little bit and add something fruity in between. So this is a great way to make your cakes, whether they're store-bought or box mix or whatever it is. Adding fruit or jelly or jam to your cake really enhances the flavor and gives it a fresh feel. So what I did, and you can totally do this with whatever's in your fridge, but I've got some blueberry homemade jam here. This sounds very complicated. It's not. It's literally frozen blueberries. I threw them into a pot with some sugar, a little bit of lemon juice, and a little hint of vanilla, which you can totally leave out. But I just let it simmer on the stove. Smash some of the blueberries. You can even throw in raspberries or strawberries, whatever you might have in the freezer, or if you have them fresh. And yeah, I just let them simmer and I let them get thick like this, and voila, you have a blueberry homemade jam. Again, you can totally do this with something you have sitting in your fridge, whatever complements the cake flavor that you're doing. So I'm just going to add a thin layer to my cake top right here. I don't want too much because jams and jellies get very goopy. So we're just going to do a slight layer all around. Just make it even again. When I'm done with that, I'm going to add in some of my frosting on top. I just want just enough that it allows me to cover up the jam. And like you can see, if I didn't have this little border on the edge, my jam would be seeping out from the edges and spilling everywhere, and we do not want that when you're working with something like this. So Same thing like we did previously. Just keep going around, smooth it out, make one even layer. There's a little bit of an unevenness going here, so I'm gonna try to fix that so my top cake layer sits nicely on here. And there we go. Easy as it can be. Super clean. You can't even see that there's blueberry in there until you cut it open. So this cake I'm not going to actually trim because it's so flat already. It just baked that way. So I'm just going to take it as is, but I'm going to flip it over as we did last time. So I flipped it over and I'm going to drop it onto the cake right here. And I think I got it about right as well. So this is looking pretty good right now. Now, like I said, this is going to be a naked cake. So what that means is that if you remember, we did a crumb coat on the last cake. It's basically what we're going to do here. We're just going to do a very thin layer of frosting on top, on the sides, so that you can just see the inside layers very clearly. Now this cake has become very popular recently just because it gives a nice, clean, rustic look. And for those who don't really like frosting, too much frosting, this is a great option because you don't get that extra thick layer of frosting on the outside. So same thing, we're just gonna start with a little bit of frosting on top and just let it seep onto the sides. So I'm just gonna use my butter knife again. And I might do it to where I have a slightly thicker layer on top. And the reason being is I do wanna top it with some fresh things. So like I said, we've already used some fruit inside and I want to bring that element on top as well. So I'm going to keep going like this onto the edge. I'm gonna have to definitely use more frosting from my bowl. Take a little more. Again, this does not have to be perfect. Just whatever's comfortable to you and whatever gets the job done. I personally like a naked, oops, look at that. I personally like a naked cake with vanilla cakes. I just think it looks very clean and nice. But even something like a red velvet cake looks beautiful because you can see the bright red in contrast with the white frosting, and it just is a very nice touch. So you just keep going around. Do a little more. The bottom edge is looking a little empty. So just keep going. Again, this is one of those cakes that doesn't have to be perfect, and it requires very little tools and equipment that you might not have at home, which is totally okay. So just keep going. I'm starting to struggle a little bit, but no worries. All right, I think we've just got a couple more sides. All right, the bottom and just this side right here. I'm just gonna keep going around. Like I said, if you are getting just frosting on the bottom of your plate or your cake board, if you're using one, totally okay. You can clean it up with a wet paper towel later and then it'll just get a nice clean finish. So I'm gonna add a little more frosting to the top because I want it to serve kind of like a, almost like glue for our toppings on this. I want to go for a very fresh look here, so I'm going to add some fruit, but I'm also going to add some flowers, fresh flowers to this. And there is a very easy way to do that. You can just go out into your backyard. If you have a garden, you can grab fresh flowers from there. Or if you're at the store and you see a bouquet or some sort of flowers that you like there, then you can totally grab them. And sometimes you can get them for very cheap if you ask your florist or if you ask the floral department for flowers that have been around for a little bit, but they still look fresh, but they're about to get rid of them. You can get them for a really good price, so highly recommend doing that. Okay, this doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just kind of making myself an even top right here. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I kind of want to go for a little like a halo look here. So I'm going to actually pull in some blueberries. So these I just had in my fridge, in my freezer. So just gonna add a few blueberries on top. Maybe just kind of all around here. It's not going to be perfect, and you'll see why. Just some in this like vicinity, like that. Some blueberries there, and I think that's enough. Okay, now that we've got our blueberries on here, I want to complement this with some fresh flowers. So I have this bouquet here that I picked up from the store. And like I mentioned, you can get flowers for really cheap if you just ask the store department, like the florist department, if they're getting rid of certain flowers, or if you just find a bouquet that you're going to use at home. You really only need a couple of flowers to help bring your cake to life. So I have this entire bouquet here. There's a lot of fall colors going here, and I love it. So what I'm going to do is actually take some of my favorites. I think this flower right here is really pretty. First things first, you really want to make sure you wash your flowers. When I bought these, I had washed all of them from top to bottom before putting them in the vase, so I know that they're clean and there's no bugs or any other germs kind of floating around in there. You want to pick your flowers, and what you're going to do is actually take your scissor and just cut up like just about this much. You just need a little bit of a stem to kind of jam into the top of your cake. So I'm just going to do that now. Just gonna keep a little bit, and you can always trim it later more if you need to, but you can see I've just got a little small flower right here now. Second important part here is that now you've exposed the stem of the flower. You wanna make sure you're not getting any sort of liquids seeping into your cake, because you don't want to be eating weird liquid coming out of your flowers. So we're going to cover that up. There's a few different ways to do this. I just like to use normal Scotch tape, make sure it's clean. You can use, if you have, like floral tape at home, or just even plastic wrap, just wrapping the bottoms and maybe even taping them, but you want to just cover the top of your flower, or the top of your stem, and make sure it's not exposed, and then just wrap your tape around a little more so that it's tight. So if anything does seep out, it's gonna remain in that little barrier, just like that. Okay? So that's that. Now, I have this one flower. I think I'm going to place it. Okay, I think I'm gonna, so good thing here is that you're gonna add some things so you can change this around. Now that I'm seeing the flower, I actually want to move some of my berries up. So I'm going to just kind of pull them up. Again, totally okay if you do this. This is your cake. You can do whatever you want. It'll still look very nice. And there's ways to just cover all this up. So I've left my berries here. Now I want to put my flower right in this section. So I'm gonna turn this around so you can see. But you can see if this is the front of the cake, here are my berries. And I want my flower to go right here. So it's kind of offset from the center. And what I'm going to do is actually jam it into the top layer of my cake, kind of at an angle. And that's it. That's how I want to leave my flower. That's exactly it. And that's it. That's really it. Now, that's my flower. Here are my berries. I want to complement it with a little more color, so I'm going to take some of these leaves that came with the bouquet and add them in. Now, leaves don't have as big stems, so it's okay if you don't cover them in tape. It's a little bit harder to do, but just trim the edge, make sure there's not too much flying around, and again, make sure they're washed. So I'm going to take probably 2, not too big, normal sized leaves. So I've got my leaves, and I think I want one maybe like right here under this edge of the flower, sticking out from it. So you get a contrast of the yellow and the green, and it really brightens up your cake. So you can see that. And now I kind of want one on the other side. I'm thinking this might be a little too big, but let's see, let's play with it. I'm gonna stick this all the way in under my petals, and voila, and that's it. That's really it. I think I'm gonna clean this up just a little bit more. Just add a couple more berries. I did have some lemon slices here. I don't know if I'm going to want these though. We can try. But I think it might just be too much for the cake. Yeah, no, I think that's too much. So again, simple is good here. This is a naked cake. The berry juices are kind of getting everywhere right now, but this is good. So this is a very easy naked cake, very simple. Only tip here is that I left my berries out for a little bit, so the juices are starting to seep a little bit. Just keep them in the fridge for a little bit longer if you can, and then once you pop this in the fridge, the colors will set and everything will remain steady. But this is our naked cake. Alright, now that we've finished our lemon naked cake, we're going to move on to our third and final cake today. So this cake is going to be a little more playful. Sometimes you want to decorate a cake with some fun elements to it, especially if it's for a birthday like we're making today. So I have a cake here that I made and put in the fridge to save us some time. So this is going to be our base. This is our chocolate cake. I have layers of chocolate cake inside, and between the layers I actually put some crumbled up cookies. So if you don't have sprinkles, or if you don't have any sort of like fun, if you don't really have the tools to pipe fun designs on top, you can use anything in your pantry that is colorful, like cereal, or that complements the flavors like chocolate or candy or cookies on top to give it a fun look, but also a tasty flavor to it. So I'll show you some of the things that I pulled out from my pantry. I've got some of the cookies that I had put inside, so they're just mini chocolate chip cookies. I've got some M&Ms, may or may not use them, we'll see. I also have some peanut butter cups. They're just the mini peanut butter cups. And then lastly, I have another fun element that I'd like to put on top of my cake. So because this is a cake, we're celebrating Salgirah, I wanted to make my own cake topper. So you don't have to have something that you buy somewhere. You can just make this at home. So this is just 2 pieces of paper that says Salgirah Mubarak on it. I've made them somewhat small to make sure they fit the size of the cake, and I'll show you how I make my own cake topper, but let's decorate the cake first. All right, so because the inside is cookie, I want to do something with cookies on the outside too. One of my favorite design styles on cakes is actually when a cake has a bottom border, so we're going to do that just with the cookies. So you can either crush them up, break them, it doesn't have to be perfect. My favorite part about this, but I've just broken them with my fingers, and I'm just going to start putting them whatever which way on the bottom and just kind of pressing them in like that. So just going to keep going. Again, does not have to be perfect. It can be different sizes and shapes. Sometimes you'll end up in thirds or halves, but totally okay. So I'm just going to keep going like this all around. And this works really well. If you have a cooled cake, obviously you want your frosting to be somewhat soft, but if it's too soft, things might not stick and they'll actually start to slide off. But something cooled and just soft enough for you to be able to press your cookies or whatever decoration you're using on the outside. So that's what I'm just going around and doing. If your cake is too hard or you need a little more glue, to say so, you can use any sort of leftover frosting you have and just kind of put them on the back of your cookie or candy or whatever you're using and just go around the edges doing the same thing. So I'm about halfway through that. Trying to change up the sizes a little bit to add in a little more variation on the bottom. The same thing can be done with sprinkles. The only problem with sprinkles on the bottoms is that it gets a little messy. So I recommend doing it on top of or over a sink, or putting your cake board or plate or wherever your cake is on top of a larger tray or something so that it catches the sprinkles as they're falling. You don't want them on your floor. So I'm gonna keep going here. I'm almost done. I just have a couple of cookies left and we're almost done. I have this small little gap, but I think we can fill it with a baby slice of cookie there. Good. I think that looks nice. Okay. So that's the bottom of the edge of the cake. Now, I feel like I want to do something on top. I'm not certain what exactly yet, so I'm gonna come back to that. What I'm going to do next is actually make my cake topper. So, like I said, I have my 2 pieces of paper. And you can make the base or like the stick portion of this with really anything you have at home. You could have a little plastic stick, you could have toothpicks. What I'm going to be using is these paper straws I actually had. You can use a plastic straw, that's totally fine. You could even use like a chopstick if you have one laying around from takeout. But I'm going to be using these paper straws. So I'm going to cut them down a little bit. I think I might want like about a fourth the straw for one of them. And I'm going to tape my straw to the back of my paper. Super easy. The entire family can pitch in on this. It's a little crooked. Let's kind of try to fix that. All right, I think that's a little bit straighter. Okay, so you got one. And we'll do the next one. I think I do want to kind of maybe like put them at different angles or different levels, but let's see. Let's cut the next stick. And you can really just do this with any sort of paper you have. This is cardstock just because it's a little more sturdier, but again, printer paper, if you have, if you want to actually get really creative and make your own by crafting something on scrapbook paper, or if you've got like glitter or you know, any sort of fun like pom-poms or anything laying around in your craft bin, you could totally do that. But this is what I'm just using, and these kind of look like road signs right now because they're yellow, my mistake there. But what I'm going to do to help that is kind of just create a little bit of a intricacy on the side by making little grooves so they look a little more like banners. So I'm going to just cut that into it a little bit. Again, this is not going to be perfect, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but this is how I can do this. And make sure you don't cut yourself. Just kind of pull this apart, and now you can see it looks way better than what it did originally, like that. So highly recommend doing something like that. If you have some fun scissors, you can add a nice pattern to the edge. I'm going to do that one more time with this one. Nope. Get a little more. And then we'll just place these whichever way looks nice on the cake. All right, I've got my two signs. I think I'm gonna want to put them, I know we might have to play with this a little bit. Maybe side by side. I think I'm gonna do them side by side. Okay, so I'm gonna place, I can try to do this so you can see, but so Salgirah is gonna go first. So I'm gonna do it sort of in the back of the cake. So Salgirah is there. And we're gonna put Mubarak here. Okay, now I'm gonna take a quick peek at it real quick just to make sure they're even. There we go. There's my sign. And then I think I want a finishing touch on here. It's a little plain right here, so I think I'm gonna do maybe some little round candies on the edge. You know what? Actually, instead of that, I think I'm gonna do some M&Ms to add some color to the top. So usually I would have done sprinkles if I was going to use them, but I think I'm gonna do some mix and match. Let's do red and green M&Ms to be very festive. So just going to put them in a pattern all along the border. Personally, if you're using M&Ms, try to keep the M off the top and just keep going around. I think fun cakes like this are really great for families. Kids can pitch in, they can do the decorating part, and it makes them feel like this was their creation. All right, so I'm having to dig for some of these green ones. Let's see where we're at. Get another green, one more red. Good thing about using candy is that it'll taste great regardless. So it's better than using, sometimes sprinkles taste funny, so I think candies are a good alternative to that, because who doesn't love M&Ms? All right, a few more. I'm running out of greens here. Let's see. Oh, one more. And voila. Almost looks like a little smiley face. But that's my fun and festive cake. You could keep going. If I had a few more greens, I would probably keep going, honestly, just to kind of finish up the circle. But that's really it. And like I said, you can do anything with this sort of fun cake. If you want to make your own stencil, you could do the same thing. You can actually just use a piece of parchment paper if you have at home, or a piece of construction paper, or even printer paper, and make whatever stencil you want. Cut out the shape, and then just place it on top, and then sprinkle in sprinkles, candy. If you have some powdered sugar, if you're using a chocolate cake, you can just put a layer of powdered sugar in there to fill in your space. You can even use frosting. So if you have your stencil on here, you can just lay the stencil on there nicely on a cold cake, use some frosting and just paste over it. And then once you're good and you've leveled off the frosting, you can actually peel away your parchment paper or whatever stencil you're using, and then you'll have the shape left. So that's also another easy way for you to actually do letters or intricate designs, a very simple way to get some fun patterns on there. But yes, this is our fun Salgirah Mubarak cake. With this comes our session to an end. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope to see some of your submissions in the Salgirah Cake Showcase. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. We're going to start answering them as I get some time right now. We're going to answer anything you have, from cake decorating tips to cake baking tips. If you have questions on recipes or where to find some resources online, we can certainly share them with you. But with that, thank you, Yali Madad, stay safe, and Salgirah Mubarak.